watch the flowers.
And here begins our Don't Step on the Flowers run. It gets tight, we get close. Up. Didn't cross the line. Run's still good. What's actually happening here, we're gonna pick up Aerith soon.
Yeah.
Before that, we have to beat one of Cloud's beautiful boy rivals, Reno. I want to talk a little bit about him as a character, just because I think that mechanically, Rufus, as I mentioned before, I feel like he would be best in the role of like a Virgil.
Yeah.
If Cloud is Dante, Rufus could be Cloud's Virgil. But narratively, Reno is probably a better pick.
Yeah.
He's more involved, he's introduced much earlier than most of the other rival candidates. It's a little frustrating to think about because they were so close to having like a rule of 3.
Yeah.
Reno is present in the story until very close to the end. If they could have just included a Cloud and Reno battle whenever you're in the main Shinra building, towards like chapter 16 and 17, he kind of would have done it. He would have been in enough of the game, you would have fought him enough that he could have really solidly been a memorable rival. Like, I think that the best possible outcome is if he had switched weapons the third time to try to get a leg up on Cloud.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the point of having good rivals. Both of you develop and then come back to each other and face off.
Yeah. So I think that Cloud's 1v1 battles are some of the most engaging in the game just because, stepped on the flowers. I didn't remember that. Oh well, start the game over. Because you are afforded the opportunity to strategize and observe really cleanly. It's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the Punisher mode counter is very absolute in how it can be applied. But there are a number of attacks, melee attacks, that it can't counter, or it is unwise to counter. Late in the game is the first example that springs to mind, just because it can be so devastating. Whenever you are fighting the advanced Technicolor Whispers, the red one has a series of consecutive sword slashes. Cloud can use the Punisher counter at any point in that chain, and he'll get his hit in, but then you'll eat all of the rest of the attacks that are remaining in that string for full damage, which is bad.
Yeah.
To bring it back to Reno, I have a pretty substantial advantage here that I didn't recognize the extent of the advantage I had over him.
Yeah.
So you see him throwing out these mines, right?
Yeah.
And I've been trying to evade them very carefully. I am immune to lightning damage right now because of my Materia setup.
Oh.
I didn't realize until much later that also negates their ability to stun you. So I didn't need to be dancing around those mines at all. Actually, I shouldn't say that so certainly. Absorption definitely negates their ability to stun you. And I love the style here.
Yeah.
I stop him.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Stop him. And then I put cross slash on very specifically. I wanted to save something for our second date. We're about to settle into another mini-boss rush, kind of like we did in Chapter 3. I want to talk about the pillars of this experience, right?
Yeah.
And I want to start with Aerith right here, because this is a great example of one of the game's sturdiest pillars. It's narrative. This game is generally really well written and surprisingly funny.
Cloud?
Another of its pillars is its presentation. Generally, it's really strong, but it has some weird rough spots.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this goes back to those picnic tables. Well, those lunch tables.
Yeah, this is the much greater expression of that problem. where you have this beautifully realized environment, but then you have there's pop-in if you move through towns too quickly, or there will be a shockingly low resolution texture or a low poly model.
Yeah.
Here is another example of a problem with the way the game is presented. Aerith is speaking way over there, and I've already heard the conversation, so I decided I wanted to try to run ahead, because the game let me do that on the train platform before. Aerith stops to speak to someone like this, and you can just run past, and she catches up to you, and is like, Cloud, the hell?
Yeah.
But here, you wind up bouncing against an invisible wall.
So you can't progress.
Right.
You've already had all of this story.
So I think that the main pillars of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's narrative, presentation, which is just like the aesthetic and the graphical quality, all of that, the character design. Then you have the action part of the game, and then the RPG part of the game. And this is a quick checkup to see if Dr. Elemental MP Absorb and Nurse Elemental Magnify are, if they're still able to carry the experience. And let's see. All right. Flawless. This is a stroke of good fortune. I forgot to record the fight for the kids to rescue them, but I got footage of the walk out with them afterwards. This is good for two reasons. One, this is probably nightmare mode for Cloud.
Yeah.
This might be the most difficult situation for him. These kids sort of fawning over him in a way that he doesn't know. He completely like dissociates. He doesn't react at all.
Yeah, he's just like
dead silent. It also gives me additional time to talk about the pillars of play. I think narrative is far and away the strongest. I think it still has some problems. For example, I think that the introduction of Sephiroth is important because of the way they chose to end this game. But I think that maybe both of those things were unnecessary. I wonder if they felt obligated to include Sephiroth.
Yeah.
I think that the game would probably have been stronger just omitting him completely. I think that, if anything, his presence at the end of the game detracts from the Harbinger a little bit. So even though I think that the narrative is the strongest pillar, I think that it still has a couple of problems. Presentation is great. The animation work is stellar. The subtle little gestures. Cloud, whenever we get to the Honeybee Inn, I'll point it out there specifically, but he has the greatest shrug. This defeated kind of like, what the hell, man? It conveys so much in such a small time frame wordlessly. It's perfect. The presentation pillar is also very strong. I think that there are some problems there too, though. I think that it's not as bad as it has been in other Final Fantasies, but occasionally they let the particles get out of control.
Yeah.
The particles and the emissives, the luminous elements. Sometimes it can detract from the gameplay. Sometimes the presentation fails because the level design does not play well with the camera.
Yeah.
And that is an enormous problem. The lock-on camera in this game is bad enough that the developers felt like they needed to include another option, which I've seen online that some people tend to prefer it. I didn't think it was any better at all. This is the Whack-A-Box minigame. We're skipping a mini-boss that is required to unlock this. I want to talk about it now because I think it is a stunningly great example of the raw action gameplay that this game provides. I keep suggesting these things that like they feel like jokes when I start, but I swear I'm being serious. And it's because it's just Cloud, and they specifically strip away spells, almost anything that would require you to go into tactical mode. The way this works is that they strip all of your abilities away, except I think for Braver and whatever your current sword would teach you, or has taught you, right? I don't have Infinity's End hotkeyed, and I didn't want to rebind it just for this minigame.
Yeah.
But theoretically, you could go in here and just use the hotkeys and never once open the the tactical mode.
That would be lovely. So you're just left with pretty much the pure action elements of it.
And it's not bad, which in its own way is kind of frustrating.
That might be why I found the demo so frustrating on the initial playthrough. I felt that the action elements of it were satisfying, but they just kept getting interrupted.
Yeah. Whenever you are just left with the action mechanics for an extended period of time like this, you can see that they're very solid. The characters move with a nice sense of weight. They move at an appropriate speed for the scale of the environment, which is something that a lot of games get wrong. So the characters move well, the attacks are satisfying for the most part. I think that there's a small problem where some of the RPG mechanics can make some of the attacks feel weak.
Yeah.
I think that the greatest example of that is Barrett. He can fire for several seconds with his gun's basic attack, and really only the last hit, the big boom, counts. But for the most part, you can see a really solid action game chassis of the action and RPG elements. I would say that generally the action elements are much more successful. A lot of the RPG stuff feels very token. I am trying to handle this topic delicately. I have some strong feelings on the subject. It's actually what made me want to do this commentary, right? Because I'm seeing a lot of praise be heaped on some of the systems of this game, and it's got some serious, I feel, observable problems. This game is uniquely positioned to be critiqued because it is very obviously intended to be a part of a series. This game feels like a two-headed dog with action and RPG elements. It often feels like they are not getting along with one another. I might submit that the Hedgehog Pie King mini-boss here is an example of the kind of breakdown, the miscommunication between the action and RPG halves of this game. The way this creature is supposed to work, the king is supposed to provide a series of buffs. You can see it trying to cast them there to whoever is in more danger, either itself or its subjects. But I just attack them so aggressively that they don't achieve that loop.
Yeah, it's already over.
Right. Moving on. What episode are we on?
4.
Okay, I think it's time, now that we've undone the top button, loosened the collar, I think it's time to pull the tie down a couple of inches. I want to talk about the failings of the Materia system. Now, hold on. Wait a second. Stay with me. I think that it's mostly a HUD failure. A lot of the difficulty of hard mode can stem from impatience. I don't want to go in and reassign all of my materia again. I don't want to take the time to do that. That's a bad position to be in.
Yeah.
To be in a situation where the player thinks, what will take less time? Waiting through the menus or just struggling by fighting suboptimally?
I have all the tools to do this, but oh god, do I not want to get them out.
Yeah, what will be more economical? Taking 3 minutes to sort through the menus, or how much time will be added by not sorting through those menus?
Yeah.
They should have done more. I would say that the Materia in Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of the biggest disappointments of this title because it is essentially the same system from 1997's Final Fantasy VII. I think it came out in 97? 97? That seems
too perfect.
Yeah, okay, whatever. The point is, let me start small and then propose increasingly complicated solutions, like ones that would have required more dev time. A tabbed Materia interface that divides them by color. That would have helped a little, reducing the maximum amount of time that one could possibly spend scrolling from the top of the menu to the bottom of the menu.
Yeah.
I should back up and mention that this might sound like a small problem, but I recorded 12 hours of footage. I've got a rough idea of how much of that was spent adjusting Materia.
Yeah, because you have to do that very frequently. Like every time there's a new fight.
Anytime your party changes, anytime there's a major boss, anytime there's a zone transition and the enemies require a different weakness, at the very least you have to go in and, maybe switch up your status ailment resistances and the element that you're attacking with.
Mm-hmm.
It is a time-consuming process that did not need to exist. Which brings me to the next suggestion, which would be Materia loadouts.
Yeah.
This seems unworkable. I'm sure that die-hard Final Fantasy VII fans or people that are just really into the remake as it exists right now immediately balk at that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably struggle to see how that's feasible, just because individual weapons can have a variable number of slots, armor can have a variable number of slots. If you bind fire in a loadout and then someone else has that, how does that function? There are some logistical issues, but they're not unsolvable problems.
Yeah.
Which brings me to more extreme suggestions that would have required digging more deeply into the design. Try to imagine a drastically revised materia system where maybe they divide materia into two classifications, independent of the color. But for our purposes, let's call them minor materia and major materia, because it has a nice alliterative element. So minor materia, it's stuff like fire or blizzard, maybe even this game's deadly dodge, for example.
Yeah.
Chadley. I haven't mentioned Chadley yet. He's a Shinra scientist that helps you with materia. He could approach you and say, Cloud, good news. I've developed a duplication system, and minor materia, he would be the excuse for you to just have one shared copy of that minor materia. Anybody that has it equipped, their AP builds towards leveling up that class of materia.
Yeah.
And then you can just equip as many copies as you need. You just get infinity copies of fire.
Yeah.
And that seems extreme, but think about how easy it is to level up the basic elements by the time you are getting to the end of this game. It's completely trivial. And that would allow them to solve a huge problem with materia management. Because now you could freely slot those minor materia without having to worry about pulling it off of someone else, or it could easily be part of a loadout system.
Yeah.
Then, with major materia, they could preserve the system as it is now. And this would be reserved for rare pieces that you don't have many of, that the designers want to limit. So Magnify, for example. It would work just like it does now. I think that just this one admittedly significant change would make materia management much easier, especially if combined with loadouts and just tabbed sorting. Maybe this is too much. I think that what I'm proposing has some benefits, but maybe it could all be solved just with changes to presentation, just with changes to the HUD itself.
Yeah, when you showed me the HUD for that, I couldn't believe it.
That it was dozens of entries
I
for
could
materia.
not believe it. I was like, no, you're missing something. There is a button. There is an organize. There is a sort. There's something.
There is a sort, but the options, in my experience, were too limited to really be useful.
So it doesn't actually cut down on time?
No, because I think it was basically like alphabetical by type or by current level. So not great sorting options. And even then, it still doesn't actually solve the problem, which is picking a slot, scrolling through the list, and confirming it over and over and over again. This is the second to last mini-boss of this chapter. It's an interesting example of a fairly simple enemy.
Yeah.
That has had all of its stat knobs turned all the way up. It has an area of denial attack.
Yeah.
Where it spreads a damaging field around, and then its other ability is to crack people.
Yeah.
With a big metal ball.
I really like this guy. He looks really cool. There's something very charming about both his attacks and his visual design.
Hey, you know what I should probably do? I should talk about Aerith. Aerith is interesting in Final Fantasy VII Remake because over time, I think because of the way she perishes in the original, she's been mythologized, I suppose.
Yeah.
She's been collectively reimagined as this pious, holier-than-thou sacrifice, like this lamb.
Yeah, she loses a lot of humanity, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you're more familiar with her in the accessory media, like the Kingdom Hearts and Advent Children.
Yeah.
And what was your impression of her?
Holy crap.
What?
That guy, he just El Kabonged you. I mean, I don't feel a good sense of her as a person. I felt like she was a prop.
Yeah, and I think that that's sort of her fate, and I'm glad to see that Remake is kind of rehabilitating her a little bit.
Oh my god, I love her!
Yeah, she's awesome. And I think that extends to the mechanics around her. I feel like a lot of people, even though Final Fantasy VII didn't have classes, people sort of built her as a white mage. In this game, she is not that. She is I was gonna say that she's like a red mage with double cast.
Yeah.
But she's not. She's actually closer to, say, like Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. She is a black mage with double black. One of her most core abilities is Arcane Ward, which allows her to double cast black magics. Fire, lightning, ice, to ruin foes. That's what she does. She's a little more complicated than that. She has sort of an interesting play style where she essentially builds a little castle to live in.
Yeah.
I will bring it up again whenever that's actually on screen. Now I want to move on to the last mini-boss of this chapter. It is a nice bookend. You fight Reno at the beginning and Rude near the end. Reno and Rude, I didn't think much of them just from playing Final Fantasy VII. After watching Advent Children, though, I became quite attached to them.
Yeah.
I was excited to see them in Remake because of Advent Children.
Well, they were really funny in Advent Children.
And I think that the designers must have known that that would be true for... They're really funny here.
Yeah.
I think that the designers must have known that that would be true, that people's impression of Reno and Rude would be colored by Advent Children.
Yeah.
Because they have it's gotta be a direct reference to Advent Children. The PlayStation could not have possibly meaningfully rendered what Rude does with his sunglasses.
Yeah.
You know? It's coming up in a bit. I like Rude, even though he's got this ill-advised, chivalrous sexism.
Yeah.
That seize attack that you'll see him do throughout the battle, it ends very differently depending on who he's targeting. It's quite brutal whenever he uses it on Cloud, and it is comparatively delicate when he uses it on Aerith or Tifa.
You're done. It's over. Finish it.
Ready or not, here I come.
Okay then.
Like this.
Yeah, this is very Advent Children.
We got a spare.
Honestly, the only way it could be any better is if you saw the discarded pair on the ground.
Yeah.
That would be an excellent use of the physics objects that they love so much.
Yeah.
If you could kick around his used sunglasses. I don't know, maybe he keeps the frames. The frames are probably, they're worth keeping.
Yeah. Well, there's no denying that Advent Children had a big influence
Oh yeah,
on this game, and I'm very happy about that.
I love seeing Advent Children-isms retroactively applied to the canon.
Yeah.
So this was me testing something. Rude is definitely still vulnerable to sleep on hard mode,
Okay.
and that is useful knowledge for later. So right now I'm doing something just to demonstrate a small problem with the ATB system.
Yeah.
If you can achieve a steady state like this,
So it's my turn?
you can just sort of hang out for a while.
He's a cool guy. Just hang out.
Just hang out and let the ATB fill up. It almost makes me wish that the designers had preempted that and included a function where if they found you were in a safe state, that you would get a haste-like bonus to your character's ATB.
Yeah.
That would be nice, and I don't think it would be especially exploitable. Something to consider.
I thought you didn't want to get rough.
No, but this is self-defense.
Good.
As this chapter draws to a close, it's time for the boss of the chapter. Sneaking out of a young woman's house. You can see here Cloud uses one of his most dangerous techniques, soldier pulse locomotion. He can propel his entire body forward just by squeezing his buttocks. It is a dangerous technique. If performed incorrectly, it can lead to complete and total prolapse. Don't try this at home, kids.
I can see that this is another good example of the action pillar of the game at play. You can see that we don't have to open any menus.
Not a one. Perfect. Flawless. I would say if there's one problem with this boss, it's coming up here towards the end. The boss has a technique, it has a special attack that is pretty unfair. It's almost like Hideo Kojima levels of peculiar. I don't know why they gave this boss this tactic. It can seize control of the camera very abruptly. But you can see here, I make it through, no damage, no hits, no revives, obviously. And there it is, world speedrunning record.
I'm impressed.
We made it through unscathed. Imagine how sad that young woman's gonna be in the morning. Part of me wants to like go back and do it again. You know what I mean? It's like, look at that.
I could do it.
Do you want to do another take? All right, Cloud Strife has been struggling earlier in the season. Tried to get out of his apartment. Was caught by Tifa, the dead of the night. Let's see how the rookie's improved.
He's lining up for the shuffle. You can see right here with his legs, he's moving them together in tandem. This is the best I've seen all season.
Oh.
He takes a half step, he takes a whole step. That was a very daring move. You can see he's approaching the carpet now, judging it closely, and he is still being steady. Truly, patience is the key to success in this round.
All right, here he goes, approaching the carpet. Looking good, that's some good form. Oh no, he's got a bit of a problem there. 1 foot on, 1 foot off. That is hard to recover from. Oh, but there he goes. There he goes, he's doing it. And he's recovered.
Now he takes a few steps forward, watching the bucket, and he is coming around the corner.
You wouldn't believe the number of poor souls that have been dashed on that very corner.
There are some very cheeky flowers coming into range. And we are at the most dangerous part of this section. Good form, good form. Oh no, what have we got here? We have a loose camera on the field. Oh, but we have recovered, and it has not caused us any issues. He's over to the last few floorboards. Honestly, one of the best showings we've seen all season. He's made it. He's going down the stairs. He has made it unscathed and unscolded.
Was never in doubt.
You got that right, Chip. I've never seen somebody do such an efficient job of breaking a young woman's heart.